stuff. Thanks, Tash. Lovely to see you all this morning. Nice to see some familiar names. I'm going to start sharing our deck. Okay, so we've got lots of brilliant content to go through. It's kind of the culmination of lots of work that we've been doing over the last year, focusing on audience research, how to build better brands, some insights into LLMs and usage, generally and specifically in our sector as well. So got quite a lot to get through. So I'll just move us on. But before we get into the content, just a quick reminder really of the intros. I work at Creed Comms. I'm head of solutions development, so helping to improve what we do and what we offer clients. I've been at Creed since 2014, and I've been in the industry since 2007. So yeah, quite a long time. Danny?
Thanks, Johnny. And morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So I'm Danny Gartside, client partner at Creed. I've been with the business approaching 7 years now. And I guess my role is almost sort of the bridge between Johnny and Chloe. I make sure that all our clients, but especially Lidl, their employer brand and comms team sort of get the best of Creed, making sure we're hitting their objectives, but also that we're keeping them proactive and on the front foot. Chloe?
Yeah, morning everybody. I'm Chloe, the employer brand lead here at Lidl Great Britain, and have been in the industry for about 12 and a half years. Always been in the employer brand space, but in Lidl for the last 7 years, or coming up to 7 years. I've been lucky enough to spend some time in Lidl Portugal as well, so I had some European insights in employer brand, which was really valuable. And we've been working with Creed Comms for the last 2 and a bit years. Really looking forward to speaking to you all today.
Lovely stuff. All right, so I'll get started. And talking about the algorithm, it's almost a meme now of how the algorithm rules our lives, but it's getting increasingly important, and it's getting more important for everyone that's on this call today and in our sector, because the way in which candidate and consumer behaviour and expectation has been changing as we go from algorithms into answer engines. But we'll just give you a couple of examples of what we're talking about first in terms of established digital channels first to talk you through. So first we'll talk about Amazon. I'm guessing lots of people buy their stuff on Amazon. The algorithm likes to bore me about all the tedious house stuff that I tend to buy these days, that rather than going out socializing. So that's one example there on how Amazon works and how it effectively pushes the things that it thinks you are most likely to buy at you frequently as you're on the app to just keep on spending. So that's Amazon. TikTok?
Yeah, so as a TikTok user, not much of a poster, but it's sort of lulled me into a false sense of security, I'd say, through really niche plastering content that, gives you a bit of confidence when you're thinking you can do your own renovation. My bit of advice would be leave it to the experts, because it's hard work. But TikTok's had a huge amount of success by sort of going into really, really narrow, sort of precise verticals of content and building an audience for a specific subset. And this is just an example now of what my FYP page is full of, because I need it. And Kirk, the plasterer there, is sort of my part of the family at the moment, how much I watch.
Brilliant. Yeah, and then Netflix is a great example. Reminds you who actually rules the remote control in your house. So as you can see with mine, my 6-year-old daughter watches it frequently. I won't tell you how much, but it pushes content that has been watched and is most likely to watch. So she, once we get her onto Sky, she can press about 3 different buttons to get watching Barbie, which I'll let you decide whether that's a good or a bad thing, but it makes it very easy to push content there. Netflix being a really good example as well. It doesn't really want you to search for things, because you might be looking for things that it doesn't have. It wants you to push things that it has. And then to round it off, Danny?
Of course, the would be a bit of a shameless plug, isn't it, Chloe? But the Lidl Plus app, which obviously has tailored offers for every customer based on their shopping habits, and it's had a huge amount of success by doing that, Chloe. I think is it the third most popular retail app in the world or something? But
Yes, it is. Yeah,
okay.
Very tailored and bespoke, but very popular. So it's doing its job.
Exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. So some examples there of how algorithms tailor apps really to people, and this is what we call. There's an expression, hyper-personalisation, that we obviously used in the title for the webinar. That's what it's called. It's not anything new. This is just we just talked about that at the start, just to establish where we're starting from, really. Slightly looking backwards before we look forwards a little bit. Because if we talk about answer engines, it's really, I'm not going to say it's in its infancy, but it takes this concept to the next level, really. On the left-hand side here, we've got an example of what would be a more traditional search query, something that can fit in a sentence, versus the type of query that something like Chat GPT or Gemini would be getting. And you can see here the level of content that one query, which took me about 20-30 seconds to write, it created all that for me. And people have been using, I think it was November, December of 2022, I think, when Chat GPT launched. So that's quite established now, and we've just got some stats to talk through how established in a bit. But the important thing here is that we're going from algorithms curate existing content for you and then send you off to figure it out by yourself, whereas answer engines, they create that content for you, which is really significant change in how you are served information. And anyone who knows me will know, like, analogies, sometimes they might be good, sometimes they might be slightly less good. Hopefully this one makes sense, which they don't always do. But an algorithm is a bit like a librarian that you would ask for something. Where can I find this information? And it will point you off in a direction. And you have to then go and read that information, process it by yourself, and make a decision on what you're going to use or whether you believe it. Whereas answer engines, it's more like they're more like assistants who would do all that work for you to read the content, pass the content, and bring you back, excuse me, bring you back an answer, which is obviously really different, and it makes things much easier. And we're resisting the urge to go down a bit of a rabbit hole in how answer engines used, but a really important point here, if you think about what it means for our sector now and moving forward, but answer engines want to keep you in the chat. They don't want to send you to a content provider. They want to keep you there. They will ask you questions at the end of giving you some content to try and keep you in there, keep you in the chat so that you don't go anywhere else, which is a really very important point to think about as we move forward. Okay, I'll just hand you over to Danny for this next section as we talk about usage.
As it says, answer engine usage is absolutely huge. Just think about that for a moment. Just 1 in 10 humans on the entire planet have used Chat GPT, and it's not even 4 years old yet. It blew all App Store records completely out the water in terms of its uptake, first to 100 million. And that obviously garners a lot of attention, and there's a lot of reason for it, just how transformative it is and potentially still to come. I think even Google using Gemini, arguably sort of cannibalizing their own PPC model, which is a huge source of income for them. If you put almost anything into Google search at the moment, the AI synopsis actually appears above sponsored ads in many searches, and sponsored ads has been sort of the real cash cow of Google for the last 10 years or so. So they're having to risk sort of scaling back that income to sort of stay prominent as well. Such is our reliance and expectation now on large language models. Thanks, Johnny. And with everything, we are just part of the ecosystem here in HR and talent attraction as well. So Creed's own research, some sort of top line stats here from it on AI, but it highlights just how popular it is in the talent attraction sector, particularly around the application stage. You know, for the poll that Tash shared at the start, I guess is sort of reflective of this. I'm sure many of you have seen homogenized CVs in your inbox that almost look too good to be true. They're the perfect match to your job ads and your job description, because it is so simple to tailor something to them. And looking at the AI use by age as well, certainly the older demographic still over 50% usage, but the highest cohort is those just leaving university, the answer engine natives, if you like. And it's easy to forget, but these people have gone through university, if not all of it, but most of it, with access to Chat GPT right from the very start. So that's clearly going to start to influence behaviours and candidate habits in the market in the coming years, if it hasn't done already to a significant amount. But for employers, of course, this does come with its own risks and challenges.
So we've actually asked Creed to do some insight into what our competitors are doing and how everybody else is embracing AI in the application process, because we know it's happening. So there's no point in saying, oh, we're scanning your application for use of AI and we'd rather hear from you directly, because we just know that's not going to be effective. And actually what we saw was a real clear opportunity to do things a little bit differently where perhaps others aren't, and just address that elephant in the room to say, you know, we understand you're using it, this is how to use it well, this is how not to use it, and also just be really mindful that if you're entering any personal data, that you need to be very mindful that that's not going to be just for you. You're feeding that into a machine. So we have included some wording on our job adverts, on our careers website, just to try and give candidates a little bit more guidance on how best to use AI to support them rather than to replace them.
Thanks, Chloe. Yeah, and there's just a couple of factors that are really quite important if you think about answer engines. And like we said, it's 3-4 years into these being a thing. So behaviours are still to some degree changing. But there's a real paradox in that there's lots of usage, as we said, but there's not a great deal of trust. So the Edelman Trust Barometer report that was released last year that said that globally 49% of people trust AI, but that's much lower in the UK. It was 72% of people don't trust AI, and the figure was almost the same for businesses that use AI. I think it was 73% of UK respondents didn't trust businesses that used AI. But it makes things really easy. You can do a quick prompt and you get the information back. But that is still a paradox. So what information is being trusted there that is given is a bit of a question mark, because the next thing is that we don't know how specifically answer engines are being used, because they don't release user data. So we're at a point where Chat GPT has at a preeminent position. Gemini is closing quite rapidly, and there's lots of other different players. So the market is still it's still much more fluid than, say, the search market is, that's been dominated by Google. So I think the big players don't want to release that user data because they don't want to give their game away to the competitors. So this is a bit of a challenge at the minute of how to effectively use or tap into answer engines. This presents a bit of a challenge. When they get around to monetizing it, it will probably be a little bit easier, because they're going to have to start releasing some of that data, but we're not quite there yet. So just as I made this point very quickly, but just to go in a little bit more detail, Danny, if you just want to talk about how Google...
Yeah, I'm sure many on the webinar will be familiar with a lot of these tools, but Google can attribute a lot of its, well, probably a huge amount of its success and rise to becoming a $4 or $5 trillion company from its advertising spend, how it's monetized its fast reach for marketing as well. So it does that by having a bit of an open book, anyone that's been on these platforms. It gives you a forecast into audience size, demographics that you can reach, estimated returns. And then on the flip side of that, you're able to track the exact value of every transaction, conversion, click and apply. So it puts the advertiser in control, like I say, with very much an open book policy. Thanks, Johnny.
So that's a really important point. We know how people are using Google because we can see it, whereas with answer engines, we can't at the minute. So what do we do as marketeers, as employer brand managers? How do we move forward? Like I said, this situation might change in a year or two when monetization takes over. They have to open the books, but we're not quite there yet. So I think what we need to do, and our suggestion and the work that we've been doing, is to take out the kind of middleman, if you forgive the old school phrase, but we need to understand audiences by engaging with audiences. That's the really important thing. Relying on answer engines to define what audiences are doing and wanting is not going to work currently. So what we do is we go back to the fundamentals, which is audience message channel, understanding who your audience is, what they want, what they think of you, what they think of the competition, understanding the messages that will connect with them, that will really engage and inspire them, and reach them on the channels that they use. So they're the fundamentals. We're going to concentrate for the rest of this webinar really about on audience. The first thing to think about, and I'm sure I'm not saying anything new to anyone here, but just a reminder before we go into more specific details that our audiences are generic. Lots of different demographic and role type information. The people at the end of the day, people are very diverse, have lots of different things driving them. And the reason why it's important to remind you of that is because understanding your audience segments is much more important if you think about how answer engines work. Think about that prompt that I showed before. People are using really long tail prompts. You can't just rely on broad. If we're thinking about how search engines work, you could advertise through PPC, and you could have SEO strategies around broad terms, whereas now it's going to get much more specific. So understanding those audience segments is much more important.
And we can split knowing your audience into two clear buckets, really, and sort of how we assess that data. So first we have appetite, what do they want, and perception, what do they think of you? So looking at appetite, it's about trying to really get under the hood of the challenge, understanding what do they, as individuals with those specific searches, those specific behaviors, want from their employer, what interests them or appeals to them, what is it that's motivating them in their career, what's going to make them apply, prep, and turn up for an interview. As many roles these days might have 3 or 4 sort of stages to an interview process. So what is going to motivate them through that journey as well? What's going to make them perform and deliver once they're in role? But what's going to keep them motivated as well, just once they're through the door? We all know the huge cost of training, onboarding, etc. So how do we keep them so we don't have to keep going external to get talent? How do we keep them motivated as well? And then we think of perception. What do they think of you? Is it a fair reflection? Is it how you want to be seen in the market? If you were to put into Chat GPT, what's it like to work at X company? What will that throw out? What will it say? Is it relevant to you? Is it aspirational? And most importantly, probably, is it authentic as well? So matching the two for the right audience, not trying to be all things to all people, but matching what you're saying is crucial to building trust in your employer brand. So a few, I guess, steps or top tips to help build trust in your employer brand. First of all, measure it. I think that's one that's really easy to take for granted. If individuals on this webinar are KPI'd on improving your company's employer brand or other TA metrics, how can you quantify improvement or change if you don't know where you're starting from? So, I say with any project, but particularly the subject today, make sure you know where you're starting from and what metrics are important to you. Use these scores to identify challenges and opportunities. Some might be more complex and need a substantial business case. You might need to lean on data to try and get things over the line. Other might be low-hanging fruit, but I would say with any changes and opportunities that are identified and acted upon, make sure you celebrate success stories at all levels, because this will build trust with your audience, both internally and externally. And hopefully we're able to implement change so you can keep your audience up to date as you're on the journey. Their time is valuable as well. We can't expect colleagues outside of our HR bubble to stay abreast of all the intricate details of your plans. So make sure you're taking users and candidates and potential talent on the journey and showcasing the change that you're making as well, not just start a project and then come back to it later on. So how we do that, I guess, and this is sort of the real meat of the presentation today. So plenty of ways to understand your audience. We can go with focus groups, be that visual, virtual, or in person. So they can be with internal employees or external potential candidates as well. Likewise with surveys, applicable to both audience, but gives you the opportunity to have a much broader reach. You can have multiple data cuts to really segment your data and build some personas as well. And of course, not to be underestimated, existing market data, the likes of IHR content, YouGov, Glassdoor. There's a huge amount of information out there to understand how you're being perceived and what your audience want as well. So we're going to talk you through one approach we took with Lidl. But before we do that, just I guess sort of a rhetorical question, but if anyone knows any of these answers straight away, please feel free to put them in the chat. How many ads do people see daily? There's 6,000. Just think about that, 6,000 adverts a day. But we're talking about the challenge here. What percentage are viewed for more than 1 second? It's only 9%. So it's just over 500 of those 6,000 on average that the average user is exposed to. So incredibly hard to grab attention, especially of the people who want to get attention. And how many times must you see an advert before it sticks, I guess, until you recognize it and appreciate its message? 7 times. So it's really hard to get their attention, but then keep it to a point where they're actually understanding your message and who you are as an employer. You really have to be quite direct, but really very bespoke to that audience as well. So clearly your employer brand faces serious competition to get noticed by the best quality talent. As I said earlier, not trying to be all things to all people, but get in front of exactly who you want, not just spray and pray and have an influx of clicks from Indeed that consume time, money and effort to get the good ones. If I hand over to Chloe, as we've said, we've dealt with Lidl on this, and we're delighted to have had success in putting these into practice with Chloe and her team.
Thanks, Danny. So over the last 12 months, we've actually gone out and done some creative testing twice using Creed's tool and methodology that they've just spoken through. The first being for the purpose that we needed to kind of flex and adapt to our new global brand, which was launched in all Lidl markets last September. So we needed to make sure that the language that was going to be used in all markets was going to work from a people perspective, because this global brand is not just an employer brand, it's consumer, corporate and employer all under one umbrella. So More to Value launched in September, and we needed to make sure that this strapline, this claim, but also the creative look and feel that came with it was going to talk to people, as it maybe hadn't been considered throughout the process. As we know, consumer always comes first. So we were trying to champion that and make sure that that people should be factored into it and make sure that it was going to be effective, which great, it came across that it did. So that was our first set of creative testing back in September. Since then, we have been developing our new employer brand strategy, incorporating this global brand and the messaging and things that have come with it. So recently, in the last month, I would say, we have been looking at kind of our new overarching idea. So our new employer brand claim or strapline, whatever you want to call it. I know every organisation is a little bit different. But yeah, we typically would be looking to refresh our employer brand strategy every year to 2 years anyway. But we needed to make sure we were incorporating those global elements to ensure that we align, but also have like a localized approach in Great Britain, as we do know that every market across the Lidl kind of world is very different. So those were the 2 examples of when we've done it in the last 12 months. And I guess why we did this research. So firstly, stakeholder management. So I'm not sure how many of you work in and kind of corporates, but what I was really shocked about when I joined Lidl, coming from an agency world, is how many opinions there are, how many senior leaders like or don't like a claim. And it was really tricky to get many things over the line. And I remember being on the agency side thinking, why can't I get sign off on this? All the data points it in the right direction. But actually, I guess what we maybe didn't lead with in the past is data first. And so giving us this data just arms us with everything that we need to make a convincing argument to get sign off from those senior leaders. So yeah, stakeholder management, silencing the noise and all those opinions was the first reason. Secondly, blending what the business needs with what the audience wants to see. So if we're thinking of this in a job advert context, I suppose thinking about what we need for that specific role, the key skills that are needed in order to succeed, but then also balancing that with what the audience wants to see. So knowing their preference, knowing the messaging hierarchy that we should be using, what benefits to lead with for which target audience, etc. And then thirdly, it allows us here in Lidl head office in London/Surrey to kind of get a feel for exactly what our different target audiences are looking for, what they think and feel about Lidl, because we aren't naive enough to think that we know exactly what they think and feel on a daily basis and how they perceive Lidl as an employer, as a place to work. So what the testing told us, luckily it did validate some things, so it wasn't all new, but firstly, showcasing our people. So our amazing talent, our amazing colleagues across the business. We have always done that in our employer brands since I've been in the business, always led with colleagues, making sure that we're being really authentic and showcasing not only them, but also the way that they think and feel. So in all of our materials, we would typically lead with like a large image of one of our colleagues in whatever capacity that is, whether it's internal or external. Icons over text. I mean, I don't want to teach anyone to suck eggs, but I think people don't want to have a list of benefits all written out in sentences. Ideally, icons are the way forward to really catch the eye. And what we saw in the heat map technology is kind of the smaller images where your eye just goes to rather than any body copy. Also, a prominent call to action. So again, wasn't too surprised to find out that they want to know, the next steps, whether it's to go to the intranet to find out more or whether to go and click apply now. So those things were validated in the research. But some learnings that we got were that our key propositions had changed. I mean, I'm sure it's not surprising to people to know that the market changes and also the perception of Lidl changes year on year as we change and evolve as a business too. So we then had to adapt our messaging, which is what we're currently doing at the moment. Simplicity in design. So something that we had from our last set of research done maybe 18 months ago was that actually more information was valued. So kind of having a lot more information about whatever it is we're trying to communicate was helpful rather than kind of the gimmicky or creative led approach. But what we found in this time round with the research is that actually cutting it all back, simplicity works well. We saw from the data earlier that a very, very few people stick around for more than 1 second. So we need to get to the point and quick. So definitely cutting down all of that messaging is what we're doing going forward. And then also something that we were quite naive to. I think we were lucky enough in Great Britain to have that autonomy as an employer brand function, and we hadn't necessarily had to adapt or kind of aligned to the global framework. Now we're kind of seeing the value now in having a global framework, which maybe we had been a little bit resistant to in the past. So yeah, we saw, as I said, we saw that the kind of global messaging could work in a GB market and for people. So we're kind of looking at how we can adapt and flex with that now and move forward. So those were our key learnings. And then some other key takeaways, which were great. That age-old question, which I'm sure lots of retailers have, is that a customer could potentially be a candidate. So essentially what this data shows is that 25% of customers are much more likely to want to work for us. So funnily enough, going into a Lidl store doesn't actually put people off working there. Shock horror. But yeah, really positive. And I think it helps us push the agenda for employer brand to be on those consumer marketing channels going forward. So definitely helps us have that conversation. And then also we saw that diverse and younger audiences do find Lidl a more attractive place to work too. So really positive, because we have been investing in different inclusivity programs and really pushing that agenda internally. And also really focused on our early careers attraction. So it kind of helps build the business case to continue doing that, but also to kind of champion those colleagues who are representing the customers that we then serve on a daily basis. So yeah, really, really good data that we got back from Creed. And then moving on with what we're going to do with that next. So I'm again not gonna labour the point of an employer brand journey, because I know that it does look different with every agency that you use, or whether you're doing it internally yourselves. I guess the big point that we've learned this last year is that it may seem really silly, but this is something that is never an end-to-end project. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it's an endless cycle. So where we used to maybe think, oh, we've got our new employer brand and that's complete and we've rolled it out, what we've learned now is that it is never ending. So we will continue to do this creative testing, but also insight from focus groups and surveys on an annual basis, if not even more frequently, because measurement is key. And what we're learning so much is how fast society is changing and how much how things candidates just want different things on an annual basis. So at the moment, I touched upon like what we found from the testing recently, but we're now in a position where we're looking at our messaging framework and our persona development. So we're very much in the create phase. We have kind of a creative concept that's already in the works, and we've kind of chosen our new employer brand claim, strapline, but overarching idea, whatever it is you call it in your business. And we'll be now looking to then create like train the trainer decks, and then engage with our internal and external communications teams internally. So we'll move on to the educate phase in the spring, and then look to internally activate first over the summer. And externally activate from September, as we are actually launching a global campaign from all the brand triangle, so with consumer, corporate and employer brand. So that will be when it will kind of be a bit more visible to the customer, but we want to make sure we fully embed it in the business first. And then from October, we'll start again with the measurement. So we're hoping to keep this going as a kind of annual cycle, making sure that we're really listening and learning to our candidates, our colleagues, and so that we really have that clear understanding of what it means to work at Lidl. And so, yeah, here's then what we're going to do with the research. I kind of touched on it in terms of the cycle, but actually something else that we are really pushing and working quite closely with our international headquarters in Germany on is they're already in a process with Creed at the minute where they're kind of putting together a focus group guide for all countries in the Lidl world to adapt the same kind of process of gathering the data and then that having shaped the messaging. So obviously with a global framework comes a lot of rules, a lot of restrictions, but actually a lot of help and tools for countries who maybe don't have as an established employer brand team or the support of an agency. So this will enable us to ensure that we have a local employer brand that works and is effective, but that all those other markets can too. So it's been really great actually seeing some of the work that Creed have been delivering to our international headquarters on that. So it's a bit of a toolkit and a guide. So really looking forward to seeing how that can roll out in all the other markets too.
Well, thanks, Chloe. And thanks everyone for your time this morning. It's appreciated. I think we're bang on track, to be honest. So I'll quickly go through our summary and then we welcome some questions. But to summarize, we've gone through the presentation. I hope you understand and appreciate now that answer engines are reshaping consumer and by de facto candidate behavior. We need to be prepared for that. We need to be ready and accept that change is coming, but be ready to adapt to that change and capitalize on it. Secondly, the trust must be earned and curated. We can't just assume, we can't just think that tactics that were effective on Google 10 years ago, 5 years ago are going to be as effective or effective at all, sort of in the new age of LMMs. And finally, that deep audience insight really is your competitive advantage, truly understanding what they want in a much more granular level when they're expecting content that is bespoke and curated to them, being able to provide them with those assets and let them make the decisions in terms of what they want to do, be that apply, but be that stay and not apply for a different role. But we need to use our audience insight to really give us the foundation to be able to be successful. So hopefully you've learned something this morning. We welcome questions. And just again, very much appreciative of your time.
Okay, thank you to Johnny, Danny and Chloe there. Some really great insights and some slightly terrifying stats that came out of that as well. But yeah, really appreciate your insights there. Chloe, we've had a question come through for you, and it's a really valid point because I think everyone does measure different things slightly differently in their organisation. So what key metrics are you or will you be using internally to measure the effectiveness of your employer brand?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Lauren. Great to hear from you. So I guess firstly, to begin with, whilst we're embedding and training, it will be compliance, I suppose. So to make sure that those different teams feel confident to go ahead and be ambassadors of the brand and lead with it. So that's things from like getting all the different HR teams to be able to update all of the documentation. So even things like, I don't know, payroll posters or contracts, same then with internal and external comms, seeing the digital screens that we have in every office space on, being brand compliant, and then that would roll out to kind of stores and warehouses as well to then see how compliant they are with the brand and make sure that that they can recognize old versus new, but that's kind of the first step in terms of embedding. And then once we're measuring the effectiveness kind of towards the end of the year, it would very much be around engagement. So we're hoping to have our ambassador program up by then, so we would have colleagues across the business becoming brand champions, and we would hope that they would then be sharing different content but remaining on brand. And that would be, we have like a colleague app, so I suppose we'd be measuring on like the engagement with those posts, also with our intranet. There's also like some of the other key metrics that we could look at, like fluctuation, we call it fluctuation, it's retention, but of course that can be impacted by so many other things. So I guess from an EB point of view, it will be engagement on ambassador content, but also volunteers for shoots and things like that. There's a few different bits and bobs that we'll be measuring internally, but externally that looks quite different in terms of kind of more kind of facts and figures when we're looking at career site data, etc. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Johnny or Danny, obviously that's sort of Lidl's internal measures. Is there anything else with perhaps some other clients that you go, actually this is what we tend to measure, or this is a good way of trying to measure internally if you're doing it in-house, for example?
Yeah, I would say a lot of clients use pulse surveys. Appreciate they are often business-wide surveys, but it's always good to get an employer brand or employee sentiment type question in there to check that. I think most importantly with any survey really, but particularly pulse surveys, is sharing maybe not necessarily the actual results, but the findings in terms of what is going to happen. We found this and this is what we plan to do, or actually we can't do that because XYZ is happening as well. But it's all about just keeping colleagues and candidates as well sort of up to date with what you find and what you plan to do. You don't want your answers and survey responses just to go into the black hole of nothingness, because then attention and willingness and employee sentiment will rapidly dwindle, and it's really hard to get it back once you've lost it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, just a very quick couple of things from me. One would be we're working on a quite rigorous approach for a client at the moment, and there's something we'll probably talk through at some point this year. But I think the main thing is what are your objectives? What are your challenges? Why are you working on your employer brand in the first place? There are things like tenure, cost per hire, etc., you can measure, but really, what do you need to change? You shouldn't be a piece of vanity work. It should be trying to solve a specific problem or capitalize on an opportunity. So start thinking of that at the start and figure out how to measure it. That should be really what you're looking to focus on.
Yeah, it's a really big point actually, because that's how you get the stakeholder buy-in. You know, this is the problem that we're going to solve, and then actually if you're not measuring that, you're probably not going to get buy-in again. So really good point. I've got two questions. We've not got very long that I would love to get through. This isn't a very small question, but I'm going to ask for a fairly short, succinct answer if possible. How do you get proactive employee advocacy in your employer brand, especially on social platforms or review sites like Glassdoor, Indeed, etc.? Any practical tips? Anyone? Go
on. So for us, I guess with employer brand advocacy, I mean, we're working on it this year. As I mentioned, it's one of the big projects that we're working on. But I would say we do have a really active colleague app where people are really proud to share like their work, you know, how their stores are looking, etc. So we are lucky in that sense that it's really popular. It's actually the most popular in Great Britain versus all the other Lidl markets. I think we've got a particularly active social media market, it seems. So we don't really need to do too much. It kind of feeds off itself, I suppose. We have an intranet as well where we always try and signpost people to the app to share. But I think that's our key thing, is that we've got this really, really good kind of accessible app that everyone is using.
Danny or Johnny, any other practical tips?
It might sound really simple, but I think it comes down to a comms timing strategy as well. If you have nice perks in the office or store or something, maybe it's free pizza for lunch or something, that then on your boards and screens around, ask people to, if you could write a review on Glassdoor or something. So trying to push a message at the right time as well. But also it all comes down to the what's in it for me. We're asking people to take a bit of time, or if they want to become full-blown ambassadors as well, what are they going to get out of it? So it's celebrating the success that people have contributed and showcasing that as well.
Well, very minor little things from me. Advocacy is always highest in the first 12 months. So think about the ways in which you can reach out to people through onboarding and afterwards. And the other main thing is, if you ask people that, and particularly in areas where there's higher advocacy, highlight why it's important for that advocacy to be pushed by people, and do that. Then you can do it in a formal kind of ambassador program, or it can be just a bit more scrappy and a bit more kind of loose, depending on whatever would work for you.
Authentic, I think, is the word, Johnny.
Choose your terminology.
No, that's brilliant. And very final question, Chloe, I'm going to come to you, and hopefully you can give a nice quick response as well. So David has asked, Chloe, it sounds like you have a complex stakeholder matrix. Can you explain which teams you are working with internally and how you're keeping everyone aligned?
Yeah, complex is a complimentary word, but yeah, it's a work in progress. I think everybody has these challenges, but we have so our kind of key stakeholders are internal comms, external comms, they come under the comms department, and then we have a newly formed brand team, which I think is why we are much more aligned than we have been in the past. Now, this brand team is kind of pulling together comms, employer brand, and marketing, so as kind of 3 buckets under this one umbrella. And so the way they've said it or positioned it from our structure is that the brand is kind of in the middle of the triangle, and then we have, you know, marketing, comms, and employer brand working together. So those are kind of our key stakeholders, and then it's down to us to like deliver it across HR to the different teams, and making sure that employee life cycle is captured. It has been a challenge, I won't lie, but we are kind of just working really closely together, weekly meetings, things like that. We've got a governance document, which is what I was mentioning before about measuring. So we actually have like a checklist to show that we're making sure that certain things are hitting that compliance checklist around the brand guidelines, etc. So yeah, I would say that's kind of key way. So a compliance checklist and weekly meetings, comms, and just keeping up to date as much as possible.
Yeah, amazing. It's quite an interesting setup, isn't it? Because more often than not, employer brand kind of sits with the people or, you know, sort of TA team rather than the marketing team, and it's trying to get that buy-in from marketing to help navigate the journey. But amazing, super insightful. And Chloe, Danny and Johnny, I could probably ask questions for the rest of the day, especially around sort of AI and those search engines or the sort of Chat GPT options as well. But we are out of time, and I appreciate in the world of home working, people will have to jump straight onto another phone call as well. So just to wrap things up, thank you everyone for taking part in today's webinar. It's been super insightful, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. If you haven't yet, please